Alright, match number 1. Final time with Auggy's RC list. This hand is pretty decent. The one problem, obviously, no 1-drop for early pressure. But other than that, this hand is perfectly acceptable for a burn hand. So, problem with with recording this time of night, especially on a Friday night, is our opponent could easily be double queuing in the modern challenge that goes on this time of night. So, chips and guac. Okay, so Island Crab. So we're being introduced to Mr. Krabs. Got it. Let's go ahead and main phase this bolt. Not going to crack a fetch land unless we absolutely have to here. I'm going to try to be very mindful of my plays this game, because someone did make a comment in the last video that my plays were truly terrible. Haven't gone back and seen exactly what they're referring to, but I don't recall making any egregious mistakes in the last burn video, but could have happened. Don't really like firing off into a archive trap, but it's a risk we gotta take here. Of course, they got one. We're at 25 cards. We need to draw. We either need to draw 2 cards or need to draw a Boros charm, of which 2 are already gone. Pass turn. Opponent could cycle a Fraying Sanity here. Okay, do we have any more lands left to fetch? We do. Probably holding a Drowning Lock or a... Yep. Mm-hmm. I say, unless our opponent had Force of Negation, they're just dead there, so. Alright. So, the only card I 100% for sure want is Exquisite Firecraft. I guess Roiling Vortex is not terrible. Makes Archive Trap significantly worse. The other card you could consider is either Smash to Smithereens or Wear Tear. Sanctifying Vec is a hurt card. Some people have talked about bringing in to minimize the number of creatures in our graveyard for things like Crypt Incursion. Don't know if that's the best policy, but Lightning Helix is pretty mediocre in the matchup. Riftbolt can be a little awkward. Skewer can be a little bit awkward. I think we'll go like this for now. This is a matchup where Eidolon is pretty reasonable. Because almost anything they cast is going to deal them damage. We have a hand that we don't have to crack a fetch land. I have turn 1 Riftbolt into turn 2 Eidolon. So. Now, one card that could get us is if our opponent decides to splash for Leyline of Sanctity. Question becomes, do I ignore this crab? I think I do. First off, it turns on our Searing Blaze. Looks like they have the Stupidity opening again, which is fine. So we could clear out our opponent's entire board, but I think what I'm instead going to do is Riftbolt their face and then Searing Blaze one of the... Yeah, I almost said elves. Searing Blaze one of the crabs. With Tasha's, sure. Goblin God makes me feel less bad about taking this line, because now I have pretty reasonable enough Surgical Extraction in their deck. Not exactly ideal for our opponent there. Okay, so they have Surgical Extraction, 1 unknown. Go after Skewer the Critics. Sure. I'm afraid I've got some bad news. Okay, what you got? Visions Beyond. Alright, no matter what happens here, inside of our opponent drawing Crypt Incursion, they're dead. Why would you bring in Trickbind against Burn? It's still going to trigger Eidolon. Yeah, whatever. Alright, match 2. Want to play again against 0. So opening hand of this magnitude is quite tempting, but the 1-lander, you gotta let it go. This hand is pretty good. I think I'll let Lava Spike go and just start with Gotta take that earpiece out here, because Blazing Root Walla. Okay, I have no idea what's going on over there. Okay, we're up against Burning Inquiry nonsense. Underworld Cookbook, sure. So an Asmo deck that might also double as a reanimator, we're not sure. Or it could just be like some type of weird hollow one. That's definitely an Asmo deck. Okay, so they are some type of weird Vengevine deck. Got it. So they're going to get to go Blazing Root Walla, cast Root Walla, cast Asmo, bring back Vengevine. Guess the question becomes is, do they attack with Vengevine? Because you know Asmo's getting played. So they'll probably Asmo, shoot something, have 2 blockers back. I think that's good enough. Maybe hopefully they'll attack with Vengevine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have no reason not to attack with Vengevine here. Problem is, this puts us in an awkward spot if they choose just crack. Food tokens instead of killing one of our creatures this turn. Okay, so Asmo's gone. We get to swing for 6. Really don't want to be handing them extra lands with Goblin Guide here, because it just fuels there. And of course, we hand them lands. Called Netherworld. Okay, so they get to play Asmo again next turn. Honestly surprised I didn't double block one of these Goblin Guides. Oh, and they get to madness it. Well, I mean, if you're going to play a pile of madness cards, this is, I guess, how you go about doing it. Good grief. This is a pile of magic cards if there was ever one. How do they fit Death Shadow into this pile? I'm afraid we lose. Cards I definitely like in this matchup, in the post-board config, some number of Paths, some number of Sanctifier. Roiling Vortex might actually be surprisingly good if they're going to try to cast all these Madness cards. I don't know, though. I believe they're an alternative cost, so I don't know that it actually gets stopped by Chalice. So... Alright, moving on. Alright, definitely want the paths. Definitely want Sanctifiers. Skullcrack is an interesting card because of it stops the food like gaining life, but also it's kind of awkward to hold up against food, so it might be good to give those out. I think Vortex on the play is probably fine. Bolt can probably go out. Shade One Eidolon. Lander can't keep. Very middling 6-card hand. I think we gotta keep it, but it's not the hand I'd like to keep, that's for sure. This is a hand that literally needs to draw all gas or it floats out really badly. Okay, Asmo, sure. Oh, couldn't have been a better draw. I guess theoretically Sanctifier would have been pretty good there too, but that was like the perfect draw to deal with Asmo before it can do anything stupid. Blaze Cookbook. Discard the card. I think my opponent screwed up their sequencing there. If they would have brought... They would have discarded their card first, then they could have gotten Bloodghast back with this Blood Crypt. Start with that. See if our opponent decides not to block. Either way, we get rid of the Asmo here. Very curious for our opponent decision, though. You still should have had that Bloodghast back in play. I don't know how relevant it's going to be in this game, but that was one of the worst draws in our deck. I think we're just going to lose to our opponent being able to control their life total with food tokens. It's taking this hit. This was kind of a free attack for them, but like if we had a burn spell there, this is very frustrating. It's one of the things about burn, right? Like you can have amazing opening hands, and then you can have like very mediocre opening hands like we did this game, and then draw multiple lands after the effect, and it's just really kind of awkward. Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting choice of when to pop a food token. There's no travel, right? No, so. Unfortunately, no single card gets us out of this situation. Pretty sure we're just dead here, but let's make our opponent play it out because they've proven to be somewhat relatively conservative, so they might fool around and give us another turn that we have no business having. Alright, unfortunate to lose to an unorthodox deck, but it does happen sometimes. Alright, matchup number 3 on the play against Sertoma. A little bit of an awkward hand with the casting here. Skewer sometimes lends itself to that. With double Goblin Guide, we'll probably just get through, so we'll probably go Sparring Vantage Goblin Guide, Sunbaked Canyon Goblin Guide, Skewer the Critics. So sequencing obviously very important, especially in the early turns. Being on the play certainly helps, though not always a guarantee. Look at last match, for example. Put it with a Lightning Bolt. Doesn't tell us what their deck is, though. Still could be the mirror match. Still could be Murktide I'm leaning towards, but still could be either deck. Alright, it is in fact pretty safe to say this is Murktide or Izzet Breach. Yep. Someone said in the comments this week that Murktide is a terrible matchup for Burn, worse than Amulet Titan. I have to disagree pretty badly on that. Amulet is probably like a 30-35% match. And Murktide, well, it's not great, is probably like a 40-45-ish matchup at least. So, And that's presuming we're even against Murktide here. We could very well be up against Izzet Breach or Teamer Breach. So play this. Good chance this just gets bolted. Or Unholy Heated. No reason to play in the Spell Pierce here right now. This is where the game does get a tiny bit awkward, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to go ahead and play into a counterspell here, mainly because I want to set up killing this DRC. And if they just plan a big old counterspell on this, then we get to untap it and Searing Blaze this DRC. Instead they have Spell Pierce. It's really hard to play around the 1-mana counters, so... Dashing monkey comes, what a pain it is. Oh, I hate this card. Kinda glad it sucks in the overall meta. Would have been a decent card to draw, but... Okay. So if you want to counter this, you're going to have to use an actual counter spell. Which you do. Okay. I think at this point we're low enough on resources, we just have to let this monkey hit us. Boros Charm, of course. Mm-hmm. Opponent with an expressive iteration. Lightning bolt to the face. Dash monkey, attempt to win. Okay, they are in fact the breach version, so. Okay, Sanctifier is at least reasonable against this version. Exquisite Firecraft is reasonable. Skullcrack's pretty bad. Eidolon's pretty good. I think Helix is the only one we take out because of Monkey there. So. So that game obviously showcases some of the reasons Burn has a rough matchup against Murktide variants. You know, whether it be dashing monkeys, whether it be the cheap counter spells, cantrips, etc. Alright, we'll try this one. Not great. Not supremely happy about keeping a one-lander, but I think this hand has enough upside to value keeping it. Flusterstorm, sure. Okay, multiple Mistress Baubles. Opponent's got to kind of play their hand here. Mm-hmm. This is where missing land drops is going to punish us. Alright, give us a land, please. This is why you have to be disciplined and mulligan the one-landers, even if you get punished for it like we did before. Opponent's hand is showcasing some of its weaknesses here. DRC, sure. It's a card on top, so maybe I'll land. It's forced to block. They go to 1. Okay. So both players struggled to hit land drops. We were able to capitalize a little bit better. Helix, smash, all this just doesn't make sense, so. We'll try it. Mainly because it has Sanctifier in the back, but. Turn 1 monkey. Force our opponent to expend resources to kill this. Okay. Let's just hope our opponent doesn't have a stern scolding to back us all up. Mm-hmm. Ledger Shredder is admittedly a problem. Just consideration why we possibly should have brought in Path. Pass. Trying to cast an EI here. Ledger Shredder conniving is going to be kind of our undoing. Because most of their other avenues of winning just are no longer open to them. Pass. When people talk about Eidolon and why I question whether you want 4 copies of it in your deck is even the matchups where it's a good card, like this deck theoretically. You see situations here where you're behind on board and it's just absolute trash. Like, I will freely admit, I may well have cost myself this game by not boarding in Path, because even though I didn't talk about it out loud, it was a thought to bring in Path because of Ledger Shredder. But, I mean, the hand we kept was very contingent on the Sanctifier being impactful, and while it certainly was to a certain degree, you see the problem with it against Murktide and Murktide variant decks. Ledger Shredder and Murktide Regent both just go and you lose. So the only card, well, there are 2 matchups you actively want this in: Dredge, which obviously just doesn't see enough play to justify it, and Scam. So if you expect Scam not to be a big part of the meta, then going down to 2 or 3 copies, 1 or 2 copies is perfectly reasonable. But if you expect Scam to be out in force, Sanctifier is just an important card. Okay, well, I at least made a small mistake by not bringing in the Path Exiles, but I don't know if there's anything else we could have really done in that matchup. Here we go, match number 4. See if we can even the record up here. Definitely keeping this hand. Sequence of lands. This is kind of our prerequisite sequence. Are we in the mirror match or are we up against Scam? My money's on Scam, unfortunately. Yep. Oh, okay, no. So, not Scam. It is a burn mirror match of sorts. Mardu or black-red, not sure which. Could be mono black burn, which would actually be very bad. Because mono black burn has a ton of they have Eidolon, sure. So I'm going to take damage to do more damage. thing that's awkward about this hand is we are rapidly running out of gas, so if our opponent does deal with our creatures somehow... Yes, they're in Blaze here. Figured they would have used Blaze last turn if they had it. Okay, they are full on Mardu. If they're going to act now, they have to kill one of our creatures now. Alright. So Burn Mirror. Breaking up the play is kind of important here. So the fact that we were able to steal a win on the draw is kind of important. But the downside is we don't have a lot in the way of... Okay. Alright, so Sanctifier, I've commented how many times I hate that card in the mirror match. None of our cards are really from the mirror. The only thing we might consider bringing in is like 2-path Exile to deal with Core Firewalker. I think I'll trade 2 Eidolons for 2 paths and call it a day. Alright, this hand is pretty reasonable in the mirror match. Shocks it up, shocks it in. Goblin Guide, okay. Nice part for us. We don't take any damage from our land, so at least our first one anyway. Hand them a Sacred Foundry. But the fact that they let off on Blood Crypt, oh my, they going for the double Shockerino? Yep. Eidolon? Certain Blaze, sure. We are on the way. If these were double lightning helix, I'd feel a lot better about this, but Moa, 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 Moa. This makes things a lot trickier. Okay. Skewer, that makes sense. Okay, path is certainly interesting here. Okay. Sure. Yep. This is the burnt mirror. It's always fun. Get those out. These Eidolons back in. 80. Alright, yes, let's play first. This hand is reasonable, going to be a bit painful, but is reasonable. One of the nice / awkward things for burn is because the only burn spell that typically sees play on turn 1 that kills is Lightning Bolt. Or kill a creature anyway on turn 1. So likely we'll get 2 cracks at the apple with this. Unless they just have Bolt. Lava Spike, sure. Land. Okay. Pretty reasonable position to play. Eidolon in. So this is why it's so hard to judge Eidolon. Like, on the draw or in kind of more even games, Eidolon is quite miserable. In games where you're leveraging the advantage here, you're forcing your opponent to deal with Eidolon. Land would be nice. It's not lethal, not quite. So, Boros Charm. Skewer the critics. Our opponent could still kill us if they have untap land, bolt effect, bolt effect, bolt effect. Which doesn't seem like they have, fortunately. Suspend Rift Bolt. Wait, what? Okay, so our opponent had lethal and threw the game. Cool. Matchup number 5 on the draw again. Young Hoot 660033. Definitely keeping this hand. We either have Monster Swiftspear into Eidolon or Swiftspear into Searing Blaze against what looks to be, I was going to say Rhinos, but it looks like we get a rematch against Murktide, which is neither good nor bad necessarily, but not a matchup I like to stare down, I'll put it that way. Fetch Shock. Yep. Our Swizzle Spear is dead. Now, our best thing with them to play Ledger Shredder here and not have a Mishra's Bauble. Most annoying thing would be Dashing Monkey, because that's just what the frick they do. Just pass. No reason to play Eidolon into Stern Scolding, Bolt, anything. If they want to make a move here with Ragavan, they can only have Spell Pierce, or they have to have land, whatever. So let's see if you have Force Negation before we commit to an attack. Opponent could have another monkey in hand. I mean, don't think that's worth playing around right now. Maybe considering a subtlety there. Okay, that's a somewhat brass move from our opponent. Should play this skewer pre-combat. So, Firecraft in, Paths in, Skullcrack out, some number of Eidolons on the draw out. Could also board out Lightning Helix. So, maybe we unfortunately bring a third Eidolon in. Helix is such a weird card in this matchup because, like, clearly this is a racing-based matchup of some kind. When the opponent's doing their thing, we're doing our thing. It is a life matters matchup as long as Murktide's not in the mix because they just hit you in such large chunks. But at the same time, if your opponent hits you with a Ragavan and hits Lightning Helix, the swing is almost GG. So... yeah. Now, the sequencing on this hand's a little weird. Depends on what they do on turn one. Like, if they play Monkey, I think we just bolt it and be done with it. DRC is a little weirder. It's like, don't get me wrong, DRC is an important card, but like the card selection is absolutely important. Not going to dismiss that, but it's not Monkey. Play draw versus Eidolon, or for Eidolon is so different. We know one of the cards in their hand is a Steam Vents. You have two card types in graveyard. Okay, so they are just attacking, sure. Huh. That's unfortunate. Guess they could conceivably have Brotherhood's End here. I have a feeling that's going in the graveyard. Just saying. Yeah, that Sergeant Scolding is a little late to the party. Okay, this will probably trigger... Yeah, this will in fact trigger Delirium. Let's see. We know at minimum that they have Steam Vents. Okay, so they have Basic Mountain. Kill this. Trigger. Alright, and the opponent concedes. So, got a little bit lucky this league, not gonna lie. Alright, so overall with Auggy's variance of the list, we went 3-2, 4-1, 3-2. The matchups that are worthwhile taking a look at, the Izzet Breach deck, the Izzet Murktide list. Trying to remember, we played against the burn variant of Burn, and then that weird Asmo deck with Vengevine and Madness nonsense. Then I'm kind of drawing a blank on what match number 1 was, but like the Asmo the weird Asmo Death Shadow deck. I still don't think I would build my sideboard or deck this way. I mean, 3 leagues with running Eidolon. I think Eidolon is fine. I might even in my build go up to like 2-2 split with it in Roiling Vortex. But I'm still... Eidolon is such a front-runner card that it only works when Burn is ahead. It is usually a pretty bad top deck, and it's usually pretty bad when you're behind. You can somewhat say the same for Goblin Guide and Swift Spear when you're behind, but those cards at least, you have the haste to give it a window where it can deal damage, and it's not punishing you for casting spells in a situation where you're racing and you're behind. So that, I think 1 or 2 Eidolon is where I would be. As far as the sideboard, I perfectly respect the sideboard that Auggy's rolling with. And other than, the Sanctifier and Vec thing, which I have no idea what's going to show up in Denver for the RC, what the meta for that's going to look like. So if you expect a lower end of Scam because it didn't perform all that well in Europe, I can see rolling with 2 Sanctifiers and wanting to keep a more balanced sideboard. I perfectly understand that, especially against a deck that is not as all in on this game plan as it used to be. The split of Path. I usually like to run with 2, but I can see running 3 just because Murktide's a card. Killing a Rhino might be a thing. Dealing with just random things to get it out of the way or creatures. Perfectly fine there. And, this last flex slot, whether it should be Chalice, whether it should be Cursed Totem, whether it should be, I think he toyed with the idea of Brotherhood's End, to help with Hammer and Hardened Scales. I think Hardened Scales is one of the things we lost to on the 4-1 stream on the main channel. So, I think I'd rather stick with Chalice, especially with Rhinos doing so well last weekend. But, I mean, it's a base burn list. You can't really do too wrong with base burn in terms of, what build is superior. I mean, I've been toying with some unorthodox things with, Ensnaring Bridge, Magus, Blood Moon, Bone Crusher Giant, and a couple of other cards. It's just kind of fits my style a little bit better. But then again, I tend to like a little bit higher number of 1-drops. I'm not really in love with Eidolon, and Ensnaring Bridge has been a card that basically every time we've cast it and it's resolved in the matchups that we want has been reasonable. Whether it was against Scam, I think it's landed a couple times against Murktide. It's just, it lengthens the game and gives you more top decks to win the game. So, and while people are certainly going to bring in anti-enchantment stuff, they may not bring in like any shatter effects they might have against you. So, it is a card that can kind of catch people off guard a little bit. So, sometimes you got to juke a little bit in a deck that is as middling as Burn is right now. So, but anyways, don't forget, if you like Burn content, don't forget to give us a comment, like, and subscribe. I hope to see you for next week's Burn video. See ya.